Warning. This video is going to have full spoilers for the new trial featured in patch 6.2 for Final Fantasy XIV and its extreme version. Don't watch any further if you've not wanted to get spoiled on this fight. Hi guys, welcome to a Hector Lecture Guide to the Storm's Crown Extreme. This is Barbery. Before you begin this fight, you want to make sure that you've split your group into light parties, and also that you've agreed clock positions. Make sure your clock positions have an alternating tank healer DPS pattern. At the beginning of the fight, the first mechanic you're going to see is Void Arrow 4. This is a raid wide that should be healed, shield, and mitigated through. Afterwards, the boss is going to teleport towards middle, and when doing so, you're going to see untelegraphed raid wides come out. These are very common in this phase when Barbery has her sword, so keep an eye out for them. The first mechanic you'll see is Savage Barbery. The boss faces a random direction, and arrows point towards the direction where she's about to throw her sword. Just like in normal mode, this comes with two possibilities, but the tell is a little bit harder to see. If she has her sword down to the side, that means she's going to do a donut followed by the sword exploding where it lands. If instead she has the sword up in the air, that means she's going to do a line AoE in the direction she's facing, followed by the sword exploding where she throws it to. To deal with either of these, there's a real simple pattern. As soon as she spawns and you see the arrows for where the sword's going, move opposite where the arrows are pointing. If you see the sword down, go in the hitbox. If the sword is pointing up, go out of the hitbox. That's it. This will always dodge both of the hits. Immediately afterwards, Barbery is going to cast Hair Raid. Unlike in normal mode, this can come in 4 different versions. First off, you need to look visually at her to see if she's going to do the cleave like in normal mode or a donut. If she's leaning forward, that means she's going to dash towards her sword and then do a cleave afterwards. So when you see that, get ready to run towards her side as there's going to be the cleave. If instead you see her float in the air and seem to beckon the sword back towards her, the sword's going to come to her and she's going to do another donut AoE. Stay where you are and do your mechanic there. Now that's only 2 versions. The reason I say 4 is because both of these combinations can come either with light party stacks or with spreads. Let's see how we'd resolve all 4 different possibilities. If we need to stay inside for the donut, and we have our light party stacks, we simply have group 1 go left facing the sword and group 2 go right facing the sword. You can also use fixed positions if you want to, but I find sword relative easier. If you need to, go towards where the boss is dashing with the stacks. As soon as you see the boss lean forward, run towards the sides and just make sure group 1 go left facing her, group 2 go right. Trickier is when you have to deal with the spread AoEs. First, here's how you deal with spreads in the donut. Wait inside the boss's hitbox, roughly towards your clock position. Be careful. The AoE for the donut goes off not on the cast bar, but on the animation. So when you see the donut AoE hit, that's your cue to slide out towards your spread position and take your spread out there. Finally, the trickiest one. What if you have to hug the side of that cleave she does and also deal with your spread AoEs? The trick is to dodge the cleave first, then deal with the spread. Try to have your group roughly spread in its light parties for the cleave. Be aware that that cleave does not allow you all the way towards the next cardinal. You can only go about to the next intercardinal, really. If you look at where H1 and H2 are positioned, only slightly further out than that. I recommend having it spread tanks, melees, ranged, healer. Your melees and your range can more or less be stacked on each other, and once the cleave goes out, then have your range slide out, and your melees move back to avoid spreading on top of each other. Whichever combination you get, after you get one, you're always going to get the same thing again, exactly the opposite. So if the first time she did the donut, this time she's guaranteed to do the line AoE. If the first hair raid had you spreading along the sides of the cleave, this time it's going to be stacks with the donut. It will always be the opposite of the first thing you had for all 3 possible mix-ups. There's another Void Arrow 4 raid wide to heal and mitigate through. And we get our first tank buster. Void Arrow 3 is a cleaving tank buster that targets the main tank. They need to take it with cooldowns, and it forces a swap, because anybody inside of the tank buster's AoE gets an arrow vuln up. Make sure your off tank is not near it, and make sure they provoke on the cast to avoid your main tank dying to the next auto. Next up is Teasing Tangles. Just like in normal mode, you're going to see AoEs that you dodge out of, and soon you're going to get pulled against these sort of hair cone pyramids in groups of 2. For this first one, the partners seem to be completely random, so we can't really do anything with that. Now, what happens while we're in this position? Just like in normal mode, you move slower than usual. You cannot leave the circle without getting an incredibly spicy dot that needs a lot of healer attention or you'll die. 4 players are going to be targeted with giant spread AoEs. 2 players are going to get these enumeration 2-person stack markers, and the other 2 players have nothing. To deal with this, we have a set of intercardinals, in this case AC, that all of the big AoEs are going to move towards. Everybody else heads towards BD to deal with the partner stacks. As you can see, there's room for the partners who have the partner stacks to be able to stack with the person who has nothing. Before this goes off, the boss is going to cast Secret Breeze and target cones at each of the cardinals. Adjust out of these initial cones. After the first hit, that's about the same time the partner stacks and the big AoEs go off, immediately afterwards, spread out. You're about to get targeted with protein weave attacks. These are cones that target every single player. You just need to make sure you're not stacked too near to anyone when these hit. After the protein waves hit, the circles disappear and you're free to move again. There's another Void Arrow 4 raid wide to heal through. And then the boss is going to start casting Curling Ire. This is the phase transition and will signify the start of its ultimate attack. Heal and mitigate, and don't be inside the hitbox as there's a knockback that'll interrupt any casts. After she changes form with raid-wide damage, she jumps up in the air, immediately heal the party to full, and mitigate, as when she lands back down, it hurts. As she lands back down, the stage transitions so that now the outside of the arena, which was previously gated off so you couldn't go off if you wanted to, instead has a sort of poisonous area that will cause a spicy dot on you if you stand in it. Don't go to the outside of the arena. Immediately after landing and getting healed up, you want to roughly spread to your clock positions. All tanks and healers are going to get these tethers. You're going to see these a lot throughout this phase. Whenever the tether happens, the boss dashes towards a player and immediately tries to hit a line AoE at them. As soon as you get dashed towards, move, and you dodge the AoE. If you don't move, you get a Vuln stack. She'll dash to each of the tanks and healers one at a time until all the tethers are dealt with. Afterwards, have your 2 tanks stack north and everybody else just go not north. There's going to be a weird spirally AoE to dodge, and the tanks are going to get targeted with a double tank buster. Have them tank it together while everybody else is roughly spread. Now, we're about to get a lot of AoEs, but there's a secret to this. Every single AoE can be dodged by moving middle. While there's currently a red void AoE that you can't go into middle for, that disappears in just a second, and as soon as it does, that's your cue to all stack middle. Wait for the AoEs to go off, and while waiting, you're going to get these symbols appear above your head. When these disappear, they spawn a ginormous puddle AoE under every single player. By baiting these all to the middle, we're going to allow ourselves to spread to our clock positions at the edge to dodge this. Stay tight. You're going to see a red void AoE appear underneath you. Don't immediately move. Wait for the puddles to appear, and then pop sprint and run towards your clock position. As everyone is targeted with a spread AoE, and this allows us to all be spread out nicely. After the spread AoEs go off, the boss is going to be casting a short out followed by an in AoE, and all tanks and healers get a 2-person stack. Just have your tanks and healers rotate clockwise so they've got a partner to stack with, and dodge the AoEs one at a time. When you've dealt with that whole combo, go back to your clock positions as there's more tethers, this time on each of the DPS. Your trick is that you want to make sure that everybody's spread out so there's minimal movement and you don't have to worry about getting your casts interrupted. Once every single DPS has dodged their AoE, stack north. the boss starts hitting the ground with a huge number of raid wides. This requires significant healing and mitigation to survive. At the end of all of the raid wides, the boss is going to start to tether players for more dashes, and puddles are going to appear, 4 puddles in total. To deal with all this in a non-messy manner, we start north, and we do 1 clockwise loop around the boss. As soon as the puddles appear, rotate clockwise. Dashes are going to happen, but you'll naturally dodge those line AoE dashes just by dodging the puddles. Don't forget to dodge the last dash at the very end, which will be after the puddles. Once all this has happened, a blue knockback circle appears middle. Both tanks get a flare, and one of the healers gets a stack marker. Have the entire party stay right where they are, stacked up, and have your tanks wiggle around the boss. Stay near to the middle, as we can all ride the knockback away to spread the flares and the stack further away to minimize the damage. Healers beware, this hurts. There's going to be more tethers, this time targeting random players, but at this point in time, you deal with it exactly the same as way. If you spread into your clock positions, this is no different, so I won't show it again. Instead, following this, you get Teasing Tangles. For the second Teasing Tangles, once again dodge the AoEs, and then prepare to get tethered to another one of those hair cones. This time, there's a pattern. It's always tanks and healers with a DPS. To deal with the following mechanic, I recommend whenever this happens, have your tanks and healers try to wiggle to the left, facing inwards, and your DPS wiggle to the right. There's going to be a lot of weird AoEs to dodge, and there's not really much advice other than dodge. You get slow-moving arrow circles. They do have a pattern to them. They are slowly rotating counterclockwise in their pathways, so you can watch them and try to guess in advance where they'll be. You're also going to be dodging that same out and then in. But the key thing to deal with is these 4 enumeration or 2-person stack circles. These will always spawn in opposite circles, and so if we've spread the way we have with tanks healers going left and DPS going right, you should naturally have a partner in an opposite circle that you can stack with. Watch out, because AoEs are still going to be going on while this is all happening. If everything's gone to plan, the boss is going to let out another huge set of raid wides for you to heal and shield through. And then finally, the boss is going to start to transition, shield up for 1 more raid wide as it turns back into its first form. Now, the next mechanic is the final real new one in the fight, Entanglement. You're going to get PlayStation symbols above your head. X's, squares, circles, and triangles. We need to have these players go near to each other. They're about to be tethered together, and we want to do this in an orderly fashion. So, simple solution, match colors. If you have the blue symbol, go to the blue waymark. Red symbol, red waymark. Yellow symbol, okay, there is no yellow symbol. Squint your eyes and pretend the triangles aren't green, they're yellow, and that's where yellow go. I recommend doing these stacks on intercardinals, but group together like this for ease. Next up, you're going to get a green circle spawning around you and your partner, and now you and your partner are in sort of a 3-legged race. You can't get far away from each other, and you're moving slow, just like when you were tethered to the hair pyramids earlier. Immediately do, just like with the hair pyramids, tank healer left, DPS right. The boss will cast Secret Breeze and target all cardinals, wiggle out of this initial AoE, and remember there's always a protean wave afterwards, so as soon as the first hit goes off, spread back in the direction that we said before. As soon as that goes, the green circles will fade, and the boss is going to just do another Savage Barbery. This could be any combination of either the donut or the line AoE, so deal with it just as we mentioned before. And then a hair raid. Again, any combo of the cleave and the donut, or the spreads and the stacks. Look at the boss's telegraph and look at the symbols that appear upon you. In this case, I'm going to show you what it would be if it was the cleave followed by the spreads. When you survived all of this, there's another Void Arrow 4 raid wide to heal through. And another Void Arrow 3 tank buster, just like before, mitigate and swap. After all this, you get another cast of Entanglement. The PlayStation symbols reappear, and just like before, match colors. This time, when you're tethered together, you're going to get a set of 4 of those 2-person stacks. Now, there's 2 possible ways that these could show up. The easier path is if you happen to get these 2-person stacks opposite each other. If so, healers go left, DPS go right, and the mechanic basically solves itself. Don't worry about overlapping your green circles. That's not a problem. It doesn't do anything. It's just you have to stay within your green circle with your partner. The slightly trickier looking one is when you have all of your enumerations or your two-person stacks on the same side. As long as you've had your healers go left and your DPS go right, this can be resolved just by smushing towards the groups that don't have circles. You're naturally going to be almost overlapped with your circles and in pairs of 2. As long as you're positioned like this, you'll resolve the mechanic and you're good to go. The boss does another Savage Barbery, and just like in Phase 1, they'll use the exact opposite of what they used previously. And when they follow it up with a Hair Raid, this will also feature the opposite mechanics that you saw in this phase. Afterwards, there's another Void Arrow 4 raid wide, and once more, the boss is going to transition. This time, there's no ultimate attack with the Curling Iron, but there's still the raid wide, and you still need to not be middle to avoid the interrupt. Stage transitions, and once again, immediately go into spread positions as we get more of those tethers with the dashes. I'm going to skip those because we've seen them enough. Afterwards, have your entire group stacked north for the huge sets of those raid wides. And we're once again going to do a clockwise circle to deal with puddles. This time there's no dashes, but instead, as you're doing the clockwise circle, you're going to see those symbols signifying you're going to drop big puddles shortly. After you've dealt with all of your stacks, there's 4 total. Bait the 4th one, and then all stack middle. Wait for your puddles to appear, pop sprint, and run to your clock positions as once again you have spread AoEs. Be careful, this time there are dashes during the spread AoEs, so you will need to wiggle away when it's your turn to avoid getting clipped by that and taking an untimely Vuln stack that might kill you with the spread AoE damage. Now, everything that happens after this is kind of a mess visually, and I don't really have much advice other than dodge, so I'm just going to show you all of the things that will hit, but not in this particular order. You're going to get those slow-moving arrow AoEs. You dodge those exactly the same as you did previously, and you're not slowed down this time, so it's easier. You get the same out followed by in. You're going to get spread AoEs. You're going to get random AoEs that just target the ground in places you can't stand, and you're going to get the blue knockback circle at one point in time. Deal with this all exactly the same way as before, with my only advice being roughly stay near your spread positions and dodge. 2 things to look out for that make life easier. When you see the wind green circles start to appear, I recommend immediately get your tanks together and the rest of the party together. There's no more spreads, and instead the rest of the mechanics are better solved by having the tanks in one location like south and everyone else in one location like north. That's because the tanks are going to deal with another double tank buster, and having them together makes this easier. And a little while after that, you're going to get the flares and stack combo. This can be devastating if your group is all spread out, trying to get together amongst all the AoEs that are still happening. So if you pre-position like this as soon as you see the wind arrows, you're good to go. Afterwards, the boss is going to transition back into its original phase. There's a raid-wide hit, and everything from this point onwards is old mechanics. You've seen it all before, so deal with them exactly as I've described previously. Finally, when enough of the mechanics have passed, the boss will cast Maelstrom. This serves as the boss's Enrage. If you've not killed the boss before the cast finishes, your party will wipe. And that's it. That's everything to know for this new trial. Let me know if you've got any questions, tips, suggestions, or any better ways to deal with any of these mechanics. As this is all day 1 stuff, please let me know in the comment section if I've made any goofs or if there's a much simpler way of dealing with any of the mechanics. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care.